We send you here for brethren to prevent your bodies until living sacrifice. My hand completely your ways. My mind will say your word. My life will know your ways. My mind will say
So, have you heard anything called transitive verb before?
Yes, sir.
So, what is a transitive verb?
Edit. I don't write, but I read.
Okay. What about age? What does a transitive verb mean? What does it mean? Do you know what it means? Let me see your face in the eyes. Do you know what it means? I'm waiting.
No.
Okay, so I'm not even seeing your face again. I'm only seeing face, and the two of you should share your face. So you move closer to
Yeah, I'm beautiful. You're smiling.
you smiling. It's there with your ministry. Now move closer, and that's better. So, but make sure you are facing the camera. Now, we're going to look into transitive and intransitive verbs. Then I'll bring up some questions that will test your knowledge on it. But before I bring up such questions, like I said, we're going to look into it so that I can explain what it actually means to you. So I'll be sharing the screen with you now as I pull up some details to lead us into the concept of transitive and intransitive verbs. But I want to believe you know what a verb is. A verb is an action word, yes, or a state of being. It expresses what people can do, what people, what somebody can do. And let's see this up here about transitive verb. What kind of verb do we call transitive verb? Is it verbs like go? Is it verbs like eat? Is it verb like dance? What makes a difference between a transitive and a non-transitive or an intransitive verb? So that's what I want to show you now. I'm still not seeing it. I want to be able to see it. Now, a verb can be described as transitive or intransitive based on whether it requires an object to express a complete meaning or not. I mean, to make a complete meaning, to express a complete thought or not. So a transitive verb is one that only makes sense if the action it performs is exerted on an object. Otherwise, if it does not exert action on any object, though it's an action, but the action is not done to any object, then it is an intransitive verb. An intransitive verb will make sense without an object, but a transitive verb will not make sense without an object. And there are some verbs that they can make sense either as with object or not with object. So we're going to look into the full details. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to call up there, how to identify a transitive verb or an intransitive verb. That is the next thing I want to bring up now. So how to identify a transitive verb and an intransitive verb? Let's see. Yes. Transitive verbs are not just verbs that take an object. No, they demand an object. Otherwise, they will not make meaning, they will not express complete thought. Without an object to affect, the sentence that a transitive verb inhabits will not seem to be complete. Without an object, the sentence that a transitive verb is present in will not seem to be complete unless you put an object into it. That is when you can say, oh, this is a complete sentence because the transitive verb must require an object, but an intransitive verb, they don't require objects, or they make complete thoughts. Okay, going to move further now by giving examples. Let me use one example now. An example is, let me give this sentence. In this sentence, you can say, sentence is, yes, how are you? Well done. The sentence is, bring coffee. Bring me coffee. Let's look at an example. We're looking at transitive and intransitive verbs, and we try to define a verb as an action word. We try to define transitive verb as a verb that requires an object before it makes complete sense. And also, we have tried to define an intransitive verb as one that will make sense even without an object. Now, please bring coffee. Please bring coffee. Bring is a verb. Bring is a verb. So, bring as a verb will not make sense without the object coffee. Without the object, if you just call up and say, please bring. The question will be, bring what? So bring is a verb. That we are not disputing that whether it's a verb or not. But we are saying, without an object that it acts on, it's not a complete, doesn't make a complete thought. So if you see such sentence that says, please bring coffee. Yeah, bring is a, so you can now say, please bring. The question will be, bring what or bring food? The question begs itself because the meaning of the statement demands it. So if you see a verb that doesn't demand an object, that's an intransitive verb. But if you see a verb like bring that demands object before it makes meaning, before it makes sense, then it's a transitive verb. So in this sentence, the verb bring is transitive. Its object is coffee. That's what you are bringing. The thing that is being brought here, that's the coffee. So without an object, some kind of verb cannot function. It can't perform it. But there are some verbs that they will perform their function even without object. Meanwhile, we also said there are some verbs that perform whether there's an object, whether there is no object, they still make, so they can act as transitive and intransitive verb. So take note of that as we move on. And the next part, I want to look at more examples of the transitive verb. That is, we want to look at, yes.
Will you send the video?
I should be able to send it tomorrow. So, now we want to look at some verbs again. Some verbs that are transitive. Remember, we say these are verbs that will never make sense without an object. So a few might seem to make sense, but it will not seem to be correct. Not seem to make a complete sense. Let's look at these few examples. Here are some examples of transitive verbs and their objects. The girls carry water to their village. Yes. If you just say the girls carry, they're going to ask you carry what or carry. So the girls carry water to their village. Now, the girls carry, Carry is the verb, and what is being carried is water. Joanne threw the ball. If you just say Joanne threw what? So the verb threw will not make sense without having the object that was thrown. Could you phone the neighbors? Could you phone the neighbors? Now, could you phone? That doesn't make sense until you had the object, which is neighbor. Now, I caught a cold. Yes, I caught will not make sense. So those verbs that you are seeing here, they will not make sense. They will not make complete sense without having object, and that is what makes them transitive verbs. That's what makes them transitive verbs. So that is the explanation there. Then we're going to move to how to identify an intransitive verb. So each of the verbs in sentences above have objects that complete the verb's action. In the object, if the objects were taken out to remove the object, the result will be illogical. Will be illogical, and questions will be raised in the mind of the reader. For example, Laila conveyed the message become Laila conveyed. You'll be forced to ask, convey what? So verb like convey is a transitive verb because it must have an object for it to make sense. Okay. Now let's just look at some verbs that even if you don't put any object there, they are going to make sense. So let's look at this one. Let's look at this. Let's clear the screen. Yes, look at this. I want to try to expand that. Let's see again. Now, how to identify an intransitive? An intransitive verb is the opposite of transitive. It means it makes sense. Trace, I would advise that you just listen and later sit down the details. So, an intransitive verb is the opposite of a transitive verb. It does not require an object to act upon. For example, they jumped. Yeah, jump is the verb, and it makes a complete sense without saying jump something. What if I say he jumped a 400-meter high? I put an object, he jumped over something or whatever. But here, jump, they jumped. Yeah, that's what. The dog ran. You don't need to say something, an object there. Then she sang. So that's a verb, but you don't need to attach it. A light was shining. Yeah, something like that. So these are intransitive verbs because they do not require an object, as a compulsory note that, they must have an object before it can make sense. But let's look at these details to that. These are the details. So with what I have here, it says none of the verbs that we have used above, none of them require an object for the sentence to make sense. All of them can end a sentence without an object. Some imperative forms of verbs can even make comprehensive one-word sentence. Run. Yeah, run is a sentence. It's a one-word. Sing. Sing is a sentence. A number of English verbs can only be intransitive. That is, they will never make sense paired with an object. Two examples of intransitive only verbs are arrive and die. You can't say arrive in or arrive soon or arrive in. No. There is no direct object. Then die. You can't say die. So die means that is to die. So you can't arrive something, and you certainly can't die in something. We're not talking about die of dying clothes. We're talking about death. So it is impossible for an object to follow the verbs. It's impossible for an object to follow the verbs. So now, transitive or intransitive. Some verbs can be both. Let's look at a few examples. Some verbs can be classified as both transitive and intransitive. Some verbs can be classified as both transitive and intransitive. So let's see what that is all about. Okay, I think I need to move this up so that okay, let me undo that and bring it down a bit. Careful drawing. So like I said, some verbs can be both transitive or intransitive. So let's check it. Many verbs can be classified as both transitive and intransitive depending on how they are used. Urged by others. Sang. Sang is the verb here. It does not require an object and it ends the sentence meaningfully. But look at the second sentence. She sang the national anthem at the hockey game. Here we are using the same word twice. Sang here and sang here. Here she sang. We did not say what did she sing, we didn't even put it there. But here we say she sang the national anthem at the hockey game. So we have put an object there. So sang as a verb makes sense as transitive and as intransitive. Now, after he cleaned up, he left. After he cleaned up, he left. Now, he left. He left what? But it still makes sense because we say after he cleaned up, he left. Now, he left a gift on the table. This time around, we are putting an object which is a gift. Now, to decide whether a verb is being used transitively or intransitively, all you need to do is to determine whether the verb has an object or not. Did she sing something in the first sentence? Tracy? Tracy? Did she sing something in the first sentence? I'm waiting to hear from Tracy.
Yes, sir.
In the first, okay, what did she sing in the first sentence?
National anthem.
No, that's not the first sentence. Urged, this is the first sentence. Urged by others, she sang. Did she sing anything there?
No.
That's why I say you should concentrate instead of writing. It's better to learn than to write. Then in the second sentence, she sang the national anthem. So, does she sing something? If yes, if she sang something or sing something, that means it is transitive. If no, that means the verb has been used intransitively. Does he leave something? When you say after he cleaned up, he left in the third sentence. Since we did not say he leaves something, whatever, then that verb left has been used intransitively. But in the second sentence, he left the gift on the table. Because we have put an object there, that means the verb left has been used transitively. So the verb is only transitive. The verb is only transitive when the answer is yes or no. Okay, we're rounding up now. And I'm going to bring up some questions that you are going to answer one by one. The first question is for A0. You are going to identify the verb. What is your noise about? You are making noise here into the video. So the first sentence that Ejiro is going to answer, that to unmute yourself and determine whether the verb has been used, whether the verb is transitive or intransitive. Now, maybe I should be asking you instead of putting it down because of our time. She was crying all day. Ejiro, unmute yourself. She was crying all day. The verb I want you to identify there is was crying. That's the verb phrase, was crying. So that was crying. Is it transitive or intransitive?
Sorry, sir. I didn't get you.
Okay. Unmute yourself.
I didn't get you.
Yes, I'll give you another one now. Unmute yourself, give. Now, she was crying all day. The verb. That verb, she was crying all day is sentence. So, was crying is the verb I want to identify now. That was crying. Is it transitive or intransitive?
She was crying all day.
Transitive.
Who is answering the question?
Transitive.
Okay, that gives. Okay, transitive. She was crying all day long. Crying what? So that means it has been used intransitively. So it's an intransitive verb. Crying was crying or crying.
No, they're not.
It's an intransitive
I
verb.
said it. I heard you.
Now, the next one is for Tracy. Next one is for Tracy.
Answer.
We showed her the photo album. Somebody is making noise there. We showed her the photo album. So Tracy, showed is the verb. Identify, is it transitive or intransitive?
It's transitive
Why?
because it's using an object.
What is the object?
We show her the photo album, so it's the
Yes.
photo.
Photo album. That's correct. Now, the next one is for Ejiro. The doctor advised me regularly. The doctor advised me to exercise regularly. So the verb there is advise. Is it transitive or intransitive?
Transitive
Why?
because the doctor advised me to exercise regularly.
Why? What is it?
Regularly.
Okay, the object is not regularly. Why? The object is me. Because it was me that was advised. The verb was happening on the me part. So now for give, it was raining at that time. The verb is raining, or you say was raining. So the verb phrase was raining. Is it transitive or intransitive? I don't think she is there. So the verb has been used intransitively, was raining, Then she laughed at the joke. She laughed at the joke. Yes. She laughed at the joke. Let me give you this sentence. If she laughed at the joke, the verb there is laugh. So is it transitive or intransitive?
Transitive.
Laugh at the joke. Though she laughed at the joke, but the verb laugh has been used intransitive. She did not laugh something at the joke. Please take note. Do you understand me? He did not laugh something at the joke. But if I give you a verb like she gave a cookie, yeah, she gave something. She gave a cookie to the child. So the verb gave there has been used transitively. And that is where we're going to be rounding up the class for today. Let's God for tomorrow.